Hello and welcome back. Legendary Bloodlines, old school with you. Today we're going to take a journey through time and the history and evolution of MMORPGs. We're going to just dive right into it, into the text-based MMORPG era, which was the 1970s through the 1980s. Back then, MMOs were basically, pre-graphical era, and it was text-based MUDs. MUDs were multi-user dungeons, by the way, and that was basically all we had. Players would type text commands and they would explore battle monsters and would interact with other players in these initial digital spaces. And games like MUD 1 laid the groundwork for future online interaction in gaming. And, it fostered a sense of community and collaboration long before we had any of the graphics that you know today. And while MUDs may not have had stunning graphics, they did resonate with the community, us, the players. They were, pioneering digital labyrinths, basically, that were crafted from simple lines of text. And they offered, forms of mystery and a sense of adventure. And it wasn't just about grinding stats and getting loot. It was about your imagination and the power of your creativity, basically, how creative you could get. Kind of that Dungeons and Dragons type of vibe. And we built communities back then that basically transcended that whole digital atmosphere. MUDs might have been, something back then, and right now they're basically just a distant echo. No one even remembers them except for some of us real old school gamers. But their legacy does live on, through all these social interactions and the fundamentals of MMORPGs today. So that's basically, that text-based era, which was the 1970s through the 1980s in a nutshell. So following the 70s and the 80s, we had the 90s, obviously, and that was the arrival of pixels. As the 90s dawned, pixels breathed life into these online worlds. Pioneering titles like Neverwinter Nights, Meridian 59, and Ultima Online. These were like the first graphical representations of MMORPGs. These games were the first that allowed players to explore immersive environments and interact with others in a digital world like that. And while technically limited compared to today's games, these titles were basically, the fundamentals that sparked online gaming the way that is worldwide today. In 97, when Ultima Online arrived, it revolutionized online gaming. I mean, we literally went from text-based MUDs to finally a 2D world, and it was built upon the legacy of the Ultima series. And it offered, immense freedom as far as the first gaming went, and very well-designed role-playing elements. And there was even a player-driven economy, so we had all these things back before EverQuest. And we even had some of the first guilds arriving around the Ultima time. And, there was a lot of these basic foundations for the online community and the MMORPG genre. Then, in 1999, EverQuest arrived. And it shattered expectations and it set a new bar for the entire genre. I mean, now we're going from text-based MUDs to 2D Ultima, and here we've got our first 3D world with diverse landscapes, 100 different monsters to fight, all these unique quests and challenges. And the persistent online world that EverQuest was, it wasn't just about the visuals. That fostered such a thriving community through features like large organized guilds and obviously the persistent saving of characters and that whole type of system, and epic group content like raiding kind of, set you up for wanting to be in a large guild and be in that kind of large community. So EverQuest's impact in 1999 and the very early 2000s, like literally 2000, was just undeniable. And it, inspired countless MMORPGs after it, establishing the kind of initial core gameplay elements that you see and that remain relevant in almost all MMORPG titles today. So then we hit the golden age of MMORPGs. And it's like, are we going to have another one again? Yeah, I've made a few videos about that, and I truly do believe that we are going to see a second golden age. But let's rewind it. Now we're at EverQuest. 1999, we had text-based MUDs that we started with, and then we literally went to Ultima, which was 2D, and then we literally went to EverQuest, which is 3D. 1999, now we've got the first golden age of innovation for MMORPGs, and we're in the early 2000s. And the 2000s weren't just a decade in video gaming, innovation. They were the golden age of MMORPGs. Communities thrived harder than they ever have, and the era wasn't defined by just like EverQuest and World of Warcraft, but by a ton of different games that offered all sorts of different, features and elements to attract a broader, diverse set of players. And EverQuest and World of Warcraft stood at the center of the golden age, obviously. EverQuest was the genre-defining behemoth, and World of Warcraft was the juggernaut that brought MMORPGs mainstream. World of Warcraft arrived in 2004, and it built upon EverQuest's foundation, but it offered a more streamlined, accessible experience, and, it basically hooked everybody, and Azeroth was it. WoW's intuitive systems and their captivating lore and streamlined new combat just attracted a broader audience than any game prior. And it blew EverQuest and everything out of the water, solidifying its place in the genre and in video gaming history. But the Golden Age wasn't just about these two titans. Warhammer Online: Age of Reckoning came out in 2008, and that game plunged players into a brutal faction-based warfare inspired by the iconic tabletop. And in 2008, we also got Age of Conan, which transported players to Hyboria, and that's the world of Conan the Barbarian, so it had like more of a mature and, brutal theme. And in 2009, we got Ion, the Tower of Eternity, and that was, these different types of celestial landscapes, and we had unique aerial combat for the first time with Ion. And then in 2011, we had Rift, and Rift introduced, dynamic events for the first time, and it had the world for the first time kind of reshaping around the players. So, that's just some of the titles that came out around, in between 2000 and 2010. And there were countless others. But these games as a whole pushed the boundaries of the genre, and they definitely offered unique, flavors for players to get into, which definitely made the genre bigger. And at this point, MMORPGs are making a ton of money. And beyond captivating gameplay, the Golden Age was defined by its thriving communities, like I mentioned before. And these guilds that were formed weren't just groups online. They were real families that we forged, and, we didn't just share battles and get loot. We were having laughter and talking, in Ventrilo, which was kind of the original Discord. And we united for raids, and we, got smoked a lot of times and would spend weeks trying to beat certain mobs. And through all this, we created a lot of memories. And creating memories is important in life. And to this day, I can remember certain moments, like I can remember the Karazhan raid in World of Warcraft like it was yesterday, because I was a guild leader and the main tank, and I spent like weeks learning all the fights. And it was so important because I had so many people depending on me. It was just a different type of vibe. But yeah, so the Golden Age left an undeniable mark on the gaming landscape, and it established the core gameplay elements, all these diversified questing experiences, and it cemented MMORPGs as the platform online and for video gaming. And while the genre does continue to evolve to this day, the spirit of all this innovation and all this community fostering, it all started in this era, and it does still resonate in players today. So beyond the Golden Age, we had, an entirely different landscape for the MMO genre take place. I mean, titles like WoW were still thriving, and it was just like the entire genre just wanted to branch out at this point. It was probably the fact that companies were becoming more monetize oriented instead of creativity oriented. Games like EverQuest and WoW were, built because they were trying to like pioneer the genre and, do new things that were exciting. The games that followed, most of them were, trying to pioneer. But after that round of, Ion Rift, Age of Conan, whatever, those games were all extremely innovative. We got just a lot of games that just wanted to make money. That's why they were literally created. The companies were large that were behind a lot of these games, and they wanted to create games like New World, for example, that was going to make money. Of course, New World is innovative in some ways, but not in many if you look at the entire genre. So, after the Golden Age, we had things like, Elder Scrolls and Final Fantasy XIV, and a ton of games came out. I mean, I can't really even get into it. But it's just kind of sad that we're at a point right now where we do have the old school games still lingering around, and some companies that are trying to create new games right now. Throne and Liberty, for example, is one that will be coming out soon. But the truth of the matter of the MMORPG genre for right now and the future of it is it's going to rely heavily on this next round of AAA titles to either carry the genre or destroy it. Now, here's a few thoughts. One is, gaming is way more popular than it's ever been right now, and I believe it's going to become more and more popular. It's not going away, it's going to get worse. People love gaming. It now reaches across all audiences and age groups, and it's one of the largest industries in the world. Video games. And MMORPGs are the largest segment of the entire video game industry if you start looking into any of the statistics, like overall players, overall monies coming in. It's the MMORPG titles that really drive the entire industry. Now that's starting to change a bit, and you have console gaming has become competitive as far as statistics go. And a lot of games are cross-platform now, of course, meaning if you play a game that's on PC for Windows, it's most likely going to be available on Microsoft, Xbox, and PlayStation. Not Nintendo, of course, because they do their own thing. But yeah, and one thing I do want to mention is that cloud gaming, it has the potential to kind of eliminate the hardware limitations that a lot of players see today, so it'll be interesting to see how those innovations come out, and advancements in artificial intelligence. I mean, we're already seeing NPCs that can literally interact with players in ways that we never thought possible. And dynamic worlds are now a thing. Throne and Liberty will be like the first game that really tries to go over the top with it, where things like wind affect, skills, and whether it's a day or night cycle, different elements are there. Whether it rains or not, you have access to a spot that potentially floods with water. They're just trying to be a little bit innovative. But regardless of all that, we're coming into a moment where we could have another golden age of MMORPGs. And we've had announcements like the new Warhammer game. Yeah, there's a literally Warhammer 2 is coming out. We have announcement of a new Lord of the Rings MMORPG. Now, Amazon kind of backed out of that deal. They didn't. It was the Tolkien people, but they came back together for a new deal. So we're going to get a new Lord of the Rings MMORPG. And we're going to potentially get a Riot MMO. And Ghostcrawler's making one. I mean, Digital Extremes is coming out with, Soulframe, which is like a Warframe kind of clone, you could call it, but in an RPG world, and that looks amazing. And we also have Ashes of Creation on the table, Pantheon on the table, Pax Day on the table. There's Dune Awakening is coming out. So there's a lot of titles that are coming out. And I truly believe that the genre does basically depend on the success of these titles. And more importantly, the big ones like the Lord of the Rings title, and the Warhammer 2, especially with Blizzard recently announcing that they're canceling their, survival MMORPG that was going to be coming out, and Riot just did a ton of layoffs. It looks like the games that are potentially going to be the ones that come out and the biggest would be the Warhammer 2 and the Ghostcrawler game's probably going to be pretty huge. I'd guess Soulframe will be really, really popular. And it's going to be interesting what happens with Ashes of Creation and that whole set of, Kickstarter MMORPGs. But with all that said, that's basically it. And that's the history in a nutshell of, from MUDs to where we're at today, right now, literally. And some of it's my opinion, but, I tried to have as much factual information in there as possible to keep you interested, because it seems like the content that does the best on the channel is the informative content. So if you enjoyed the informative content, and I hate to ask, but you know the deal, everybody does it. There's an algorithm, my channel's tiny. So if you could just please hit the like button and hit subscribe. I mean, that helps my channel tremendously. I'm just trying to get to 300 subs right now. It'd be amazing to hit 1,000 subscribers someday. Because with my subscribers, I reach a broader audience. And that means when I do content, I know that when I spend, between 2 or 10 hours producing a piece of content, at least it's going to be seen by quite a few people. It's not that exciting for me and the channel when I produce some content and it gets like 10 likes and no views. So yeah, I did this at the end of the video, so you could have hit stop if you wanted to. If you stuck with me, thank you. I appreciate it very much. And I hope you actually have a great day. So tune in again next time, and you're awesome. Thanks for sticking with me, and I'll talk to you again later. Have a good one, everybody.